book of Joshua, we have finally hit chapter 12. Has anybody looked at chapter 12 yet? Has an idea of what's in it? Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is a list of the 31 kings that Joshua has come through and conquered to get the promised land for Israel. Now, when I say it's literally just a list, that's exactly what it is. It's a quick comprised list of everything they've done. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the book of Joshua up into chapter 12. And we're going to kind of touch a few of the important things that we spoke about. I'm going to have you guys read some verses, and we're going to enjoy learning more about Joshua. So the first section that we're going to kind of do is going to be a little different because we're not actually going to be going through 12. Section 1, we're going to review chapters 1 through 11, and we're going to kind of go through what we've learned, what we've gained out of each one of these sections here. Section 2 is going to be the 31 kings removed, and we're going to talk about those Amarna letters again. Those have come up a couple times. They're pretty awesome, so you'll enjoy those ones. And then section 3, we're going to briefly talk about what's going to happen next. What are we going to look forward to after this guy here? So, chapter 1. Moses dies and Joshua takes over, right? In this one, Joshua's getting up. He's nervous. Bible verse that I liked on this one is chapter 1, verse 9, where God tells him, it says, "Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest." Right? So right off the bat, right, Moses died, Joshua's in charge, and understandably, he's probably a little jittery and nervous about taking over an entire nation. Right? So God is saying, hey, I've told you, man, you don't have to worry about this, right? So God is kind of lifting Joshua up here in this first one. Chapter 2. All right, we get into chapter 2, we learn about Rahab. Rahab saves the spies. Can anybody tell me how she did that?
She hid the
Yeah. How'd she hide?
in the tower.
In the tower of her house, right? Right? And then after she saves them, they did what? They made a what with her? Covenant. Yes, my spelling is probably wrong, but that's okay. Who's got me? Read me 13 and 14. Who's got a Bible open? Read me 13 and 14. The covenant in chapter.
Right now?
Yes, sir. Told you this is an interactive one.
Okay. 13 through 14.
Yep. Chapter 2, 13 and 14.
"And spare my father and mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death." So the men answered her, "Our lives for yours. If none of you tell this business of ours, then it shall be. Then the Lord has given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with you."
So Rahab steps up. Right? She's in the culture of all sorts of psychoticness, right? We talked about how deep into paganism and idolatry these people were into, even necromancy. We talked about that too, right? So this is the world that Rahab is living in. But she recognized the God of Israel and his ultimate power. And she saved these two spies, right? And we know in the next verse in I think it's 15, she let them down through the window, right? So we know biblically that her house was on the outer wall, on the inside of the outer wall, and that she had a window leaving her house going down, right? Pretty amazing, right? So they make a covenant with her. And then we read in verse 24. Go ahead.
Chapter 2, verse 24.
Yep.
And they said to Joshua, "Truly the Lord has delivered all the lands into our hands. For indeed all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us."
Faint-hearted. The people know who the Jews are, right? The story of them leaving Egypt wasn't a secret. It wasn't a quiet event at all. There was a whole lot going on right when they left, right? The world at this time knows that they've left Egypt. The world knows at this time that they've been traveling to them aimlessly out in the desert for 40 years. And all of a sudden, they've parked themselves right over here in 2, right? And they send a couple spies over. Now, these people in this town are afraid because of the numbers of the people of Israel. And so they come back, they're terrified. Everyone sees us out here. They're all freaking out. Like, we've got this. Faint-hearted enemies. In chapter 3, this is the one that I got to do, so I have a couple more notes on this one. This was pretty fun. We got new marching orders in this chapter. Remember? We had the Ark of the Covenant, and they had the Ark of the Covenant here, and then they were ordered to be 2,000 cubits out and a half moon shape around the Ark as they would move. The new marching orders, right? Joshua is magnified. Wes, you read me verse 7 in chapter 3, please.
And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day will I begin to magnify thee in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with thee.
He's telling Joshua, hey, I'm going to make sure that these people are always behind you. Right? I'm going to magnify you up. I'm going to show the people of Israel that you are essentially the new Moses. You are in charge. And I'm going to do that this day. So it kind of tells us up to this point, Moses has died. I can imagine there's a little bit of unrest, a little bit of uneasiness, not knowing. They know who Joshua is, right? We know this because he was actually one of 2 people who were exempted, right, in the walk of the 40 years. Right? Everyone had to die. Any man of fighting age had to pass away. They weren't allowed to go through, except for Joshua and one other. So Joshua spent the whole 40 years running around with Moses, helping and learning. And so the people knew who he was, but he was always this other guy. Now he's the guy. And God says, today I'm going to magnify you before the people, so that there will be no question on who it is that they are to follow. Right? He says this, the Jordan dries up, crossing over against Jericho, right? This is our chapter 3. We come in, it's a new walking orders mixture. We learned, one of the new words that we learned in this chapter also, the word sanctify or consecrate was kadash, right? This would include outward purification and washing, inward devotion to God, right? So we learned a couple new words on there, sanctify, kadash. 4. Chapter 4 comes into the 12 memorial stones, right? So it starts out, it says, it came to pass when all the people were clean passed over the Jordan, right? The Jordan stopped, God dried the waters, Israel was able to walk straight across, right? So now Jericho's really scared, right? So, what do? He has in place 12 stones in the center of the Jordan, and I believe they also stick 12 stones up at Gilgal. Why?
That this may be a sign among you, when your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And it keeps going. And when it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever.
That's right. This will be a memorial forever, right? We know that these stones can still be seen today. If you go out there to the Jordan, right at the crossing of Jericho, Shannon Hill, they still stick out in the middle of the Jordan. That's pretty amazing. The Bible says they're still there, and guess what? They are. Right? And what's really crazy is the Jordan swells real big, and this is the time that they came by, right? The waters were super wide. But even when it's not flowing super well, it's not a space of water that you can just walk across. There's a reason that they stuck 12 giant stones in the middle of this thing. Because to do so is something that's impossible. Right? So people look out there and see themselves like, how in the world did that happen? Let me tell you about the God. Let me tell you about God. Let me tell you all about how that happened. Right? It's for memorial. Verse 24. Who's got?
So that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.
So that when you see these, you know, and all the people of the land will know how mighty the God of Israel is. Because they know that none of their gods can stop the water. That also wasn't a secret thing, right? We know that all the way back up to the town of Adam, that the water stood up against itself straight up in the air, right? We went through and defined all those words. That wasn't a secret. That was pretty obvious to everyone around, right? They're faint-hearted, right? We just read about that. Our enemies are faint-hearted. I bet they are. I bet they are, right? Chapter 5. Ooh, the mean one. Chapter 5. So, we got to get right with God, right? Circumcised. Who's going to read me 8 and 9?
So it was when they had finished circumcising all the people that they stayed in their places in the camp till they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day.
Gilgal literally means rolling. It means rolling. This place will be called Gilgal, right? Get right to God. They had to get circumcised. They needed the reproach of Egypt. They needed all of the idolatry, all the mistakes, all the things they had been doing wrong washed clean because they were about to start on a holy adventure, right? This was promised. God leading, they must be right with God. Part of that we know from Moses' side, right? Circumcision. They didn't actually do it the whole 40 years that they were moving around. So when they crossed over, there were a whole lot of very unhappy individuals, right? So they did this, though. They got right with God. Right? This is very important. Then, who do we meet right at the very end of that? Captain of the host of the Lord. Can anybody tell me who that was? Who is it?
It was Jesus.
There he is. Look at you go. Right? We meet Jesus, right? He shows up and he has his sword out, right? We talked about this. I believe it is in Numbers. There's another point where the captain of the host of the Lord appears with a sword out, right? The word shows with the word ready, right? So we meet the captain of the host, and what does Joshua? He runs out and goes, "Hey, you on our side or are you on their side?" Does anybody know what he answers him? What do you answer him?
I am.
I am? Yes, he is I am, but what side of the fight is he on?
Well, doesn't he say, "You're on my side"?
Yeah, he says, "I'm not on anybody's side, because I'm here, I'm the captain of the host of the Lord. Are you on my side?" Right? He's like, "This is the wrong question, homie." And immediately, Joshua realizes who he's talking to. What does he do? Drops.
Right?
Right?
You just say in verse 14, he just says, "No." And it's like, "Are you on my side or are you on the other side?" And then he's like,
No.
"No." That's it.
That needs to be a verse all by itself.
Yeah.
No. He's like, "Are you on my side?" Right? Are you on God's side? Are you trying to do all this stuff? Right? Chapter 6. Jericho is straightly shut up. Yes, they are. The water just dried up. A whole army just came across and camped just outside the town. And then the water came flowing all back. They locked down. Shut the gates, locked it in. No one in, no one out. Now look what they did here. They put all of their hope, all of their faith, all of their resources into a mud brick wall. How did that work out for them? Anybody remember what happened to the walls of Jericho? What happened?
They tumbled down.
Dropped, right? And we know in the study that we did that the walls fell below themselves, right? According to the words that are actually used. So, and we see in the archaeological evidence as the walls fell, boom, they actually fell like this, creating what the Bible said was a ramp going straight into the city, right? They had to do nothing. Then, right before this whole thing kicks off, right? Remember in Joshua we kind of jump back and forth. He comes in, he gives instruction on the plunder. Now this is real important as we're going to find out in the next one. So, I need 18 and 19. Who wants to read me? 18 and 19.
"And ye in any wise keep yourself from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourself accursed. When ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessel of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord."
Come in the treasury of the Lord. God had consecrated the loot of this conquest for his temple. If you guys don't get anything this time, this whole city, every single bit of it is going to get razed straight to the ground, and all of the loot goes into the Lord's treasury. All of it, right? Straightly shut up. They're given the instructions on plunder, and what do? Right? They march around the city. They're given their instructions. They're given their marching orders. You guys remember how they went? Army, trumpets. You guys remember? Ark of the Covenant, trumpets, rear guard. This is the marching order, right? Trumpets are going, they blow their horns, they go around the city one time. For 6 days, and on the seventh day, they do it how many times? 7. You got it right. And on the seventh time, what does Joshua command the people to do?
They scream.
Oh, right? They let it have it, right? And all of them, their war cries goes out. What happens? Boom! Down it goes. And what does the Bible tell us that they did? They killed everybody. Man, woman, child, beast, everything. They burned the food. Remember, we look back at the one when I did this study, when they first dug up Jericho, they found huge earthen vessels filled with barley, burnt. Now, let me tell you, we talked about this last time, an invading army in these times, coming in and taking over, they don't leave the food. Not only do they not leave the food, they don't burn the food. That doesn't happen, because food is life. You don't. It's not readily available. You run out. I mean, they didn't have Safeway back then. Right? So you conquer a city and you're like, woohoo, food storage. Nope, God said, burn it. And when they dug up Jericho, they found giant, burnt up earthen vessels of barley. One more thing is constantly proof, right? Archaeology, I love it. The Bible proves archaeology all the time. Archaeology doesn't prove the Bible. They can't do any of their work over there without the Bible. It's amazing. So that was 6, right? The fall of Jericho. And remember, what did they start doing with the kings? This was the first one, and it gets mentioned again at once. What happened? They hung him. What did that mean?
Like on a big tree.
On a shish kebab style, right? Very unpleasant, right? Not hanging, not how we know it, but... So that was the first king, right? And they did that. They did not leave him to stand up for the whole night, right? Because we read that any man hung on a tree is cursed, and the land that he's hung on is also cursed. So he was not allowed to stay hung up in the air until the whole day. So in the evening, he was brought back down. Chapter 7. We learn here in chapter 7 what happens when you disobey God. Achan, he steals, right? He went through, he stole some garments, he stole some coins, some gold bars, there's a little list in there, but he stole a whole bunch of stuff, right? And then he tried to hide the fact that he stole the stuff by going back to his tent, digging a hole and burying it, right? Not very secret. His whole family knew about it. Nobody turned him in. And what happens? Right? Nobody knows this except the family. It's hush hush, right? It's hush hush. They send out a couple of guys out to go look at Ai, and they're like, "Oh, we got this, man. They're weaker than Jericho. Let's go!" And they all take off. And what happens? They get wrecked. 36 men died. 36. Now you go from 100% victory to just getting torn to pieces and losing your best friends. What happened? Well, they find out, right? You go read it in the castle house. God told them. It was Achan. You need to go get him, right? They go get him, and they bring him, and they ask him, and say, glorify God and confess what you've done. And he did, and he confessed. What happened? Anybody tell me what happened to Achan and his family? Both hit him.
You give it.
Do it.
Well, they'd hit you
With
with stones.
stone you to death. Absolutely. Now, notice at the end, there we go. And in verse 26, right here, I'll read the verse 24 and 26. So Joshua and all of Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, the silver and the garment and the wedge of gold and his sons and his daughters and his oxen and his asses and his sheep and his tent and all that they had, and they brought them unto the valley of Achor. They took everything. Everything. In verse 25 says, Joshua said, why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones and burned them with fire after they had stoned him with stones. Now, they raised over him, in verse 26, a great heap of stones unto this day. So the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger, wherefore the name of that place was called the Valley of Achor to this day. And Achor means trouble. Literally means trouble. The Valley of Trouble. So, they stone him. They stone him, his entire family. They burn him, his entire family. And then they cover the entire existence in rock. People are now sanctified again. They're no longer under the status of condemnation, right? So, Achan and all his was stoned to death. We just read 24 and 26. So that brings us to chapter 8. Well, chapter 8, that was a pretty fun one too. This one, I will be conquered. Right? So this time, now that they're all straightened out, right? Achan's out of the picture. They've been re-sanctified. They're good with God. They're now following the plan of God, right? And God gives them the plan. What does he tell them to do? Right? We're sending out spies, right? They send out 30 mighty men of valor. You guys remember that? We talked about that. It wasn't the 30,000, right? The word thousand. The word thousand is elep, right? And that one, I'll just read this whole thing. It means elep. It's interesting is when used in certain passages, again in 1 Chronicles 12, 23 and 27, 2 Chronicles 13, 3 and 17, also in 2 Chronicles 17, 14 and 19. In these passages, the word is defined as chief or officer, right? So we learned that Joshua didn't send out 30,000 men to go hide behind Ai. He sent out 30 SEALs, Navy SEALs, super Marines, right? The captains, the guards, the guys who had men underneath of them, right? The big guys. So he sent them out there, right? Then he sent out another 5,000 to go hide just off the side between Ai and Bethel, which was right behind it, right? So we had 5,000 hiding here. You had the 30 guys hiding right behind Ai to light it on fire as a signal. And then what did he have them do? He said, you're going to go down just like you did before, and you're going to convince them that you're lost, and they're going to chase you out. And it worked. All the men came running out, chased them out, right? They kept going, they kept going, they kept going. And right, the Bible says in this one, he says that Joshua stuck out a spear. Right? Y'all remember that one? We talked about that one, right? About the spear not actually being a spear, right? That word is kidon, right? It's not actually a spear. This word specifically means scimitar, right? Remember, scimitar is the long, wide blade. So when Joshua turned in that morning light and pointed his sword, his kidon, and flashed and turned his wrist, it would spark the light, which light goes miles and miles and miles. So these 30 men who were hiding, watching the cloud of dust, and the guys like, when does it go? And all of a sudden, flash, flash, flash. Off we go. Right? They go tear it in there. Ai gets conquered. Again, they take the whole place out. Kill them out. Mighty men of valor, we just talked about that. Then, the law of the land is established. All right? Israel has just now efficiently cut out the center of the Canaanite Empire, right? We know there's the northern side, the southern side, and the center side. They just came in and just boop, cut them straight in half, right? This is going to start making people freak out. So the law of the land, verse 34 and 35 in verse 8. 34 and 35, I'll read to you guys here. It says, and afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessings and the cursings, according to all that is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses commanded which Joshua read not before all the congregation of Israel. With the women and the little ones and the strangers that were conversant among them. So remember, they're sitting there before the two hills, right? They've done one hill slightly higher than the other hill. They've done two different sacrifices. They have all the people sitting down in the front of these hills with Ark of the Covenant sitting in front of them, making a natural amphitheater. Right? And so when Joshua, or one of the Levite leads, got up there and spoke and read out all these words, he didn't have to scream or yell to get everyone to hear him. The amphitheater echoed his voice off there. So he was just able to just talk loudly, and all of the congregation could hear them. Right? So he went through and they established the law of the land. So this is the promised land, and these are the laws that will be abided here. Right? And that's how we leave chapter 8. We come into chapter 9. Jamie covered this one. This was a great one. The lies, right? They get deceived in making a covenant with these guys and making peace. They weren't supposed to do that, right? Right? They're supposed to conquer, kill, destroy, take, not make peace. Well, it gets discovered. Gideon's deceit is discovered, verse 23 and 24. So this is chapter 9, 23 to 27. Chapter 9.
Now therefore you are accursed. And now therefore you are accursed, and some of you shall never be again, but servants, cutters of wood, and drawers of water for the house of my God. They answered Joshua, because it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God has commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you and did this thing. And now behold, we are in your hand. Whatever seems good and right in your sight to do to us, do it. So he did this to them and delivered them out of the hand of the people of Israel, and they did not kill them. But Joshua made them that day cutters of wood and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord to this day in the place that he should choose.
It's pretty interesting there. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but he cursed them pretty hard, right? Essentially, he turned them all into slaves. Like, you're going to run water, cut wood, you're going to do all the stuff that we don't have time to do, you're going to do that for us, right? That's just worth it. They were going to be killed. But it said even right there that Joshua saved them out of the hand of Israel. All of Israel probably standing there going, chomping at the bit, like, let's get them. Lie to us, and what's this, you know? Nope. They got cursed. There was a punishment. But they didn't kill them. Now, that brings us into chapter 10. Now this, chapter 10, this is when we got into the southern kingdom, right? We just talked about how the center got punched out. We're going to drop down. We're going to dip down into the south. Now, the conspiracy of the 5 kings, right? Everyone's freaking out at this point, right? So, what's his name? Adonizedek. There we go. He calls all the people. He's the king of Jerusalem. He calls all the kings of these city-states. Now remember, when we say king, you're not thinking of massive nations. These are city-states. So it's like it's the king of this city. Their reign and rule doesn't really much go out too much further than that, right? But he calls these guys in here and he says, "Hey, Jericho's gone, Ai's gone. They're coming. They're coming right now. If we don't get together, we don't have a chance, right?" And we talked about how these 5 kings, they weren't all necessarily good friends. Like, they weren't buddies, but they came together on a common goal on this one, right? In hopes to stop this stampede of Israel just coming through and wiping everybody out, right? In chapter 10, they come up and they attack the city, and Joshua brings up the men. They run all night, right? Remember we talked about they had to run uphill, right? So they're super tired. They get there really, really fast. As soon as the sun comes up, and they start attacking the guys, right? As the sun's coming up, Joshua prays out and asks God to save them. Ask for the sun to stand still. Now, come over here. We learned that stand still is demam. All right, now this was a fun one here. The prime root of that word meaning to be silent, to die, to be struck dumb, rest, or cause. Now, I'll go again. We talked about this last time, but this specific word, stand still, demam, is found 30 times in the Bible. And each time, 6 times silence, 6 times still, 6 times silence, 6 times still, 4 times silent, 3 times cut off, 2 times cut down, 2 times rest, 2 times cease, 1 times forbear, 1 times peace, 1 times charity, 1 times wait. What we learned is that he didn't ask the sun to stop moving. He asked the sun to stop the heat that it was bringing, right? It asked him to be silent, to be still, be dumb. And what did God do? He brought a hailstorm. He brought a huge storm with all these clouds that come over and blocked out the sun, cooling the day so that Israel would not be beaten down by the sun. On top of that, he threw some sprinkles on there and he dropped down hailstones and killed more people with the hailstones than the Jews did fighting them. He's like, "Don't worry guys, I got this. It's too hot, you're feeling kind of rusty. Oh yeah, just chase him for a while, I got this." That's the power of God, right? The Jews were tired, right? Their bodies were beat. They've been fighting. They've been running for miles uphill. God brings relief. Even in the most disastrous situation, they're in the middle of fighting a war. People are dying. And God still provides relief to his people, right? So, hailstones, again, we knew fell during the summer. During the summer in this area, clouds are non-existent. There's no rain, there are no clouds. It doesn't happen, right? So the storm coming out of nowhere, again, is a major miracle. That people are noticing this, right? And then, of course, the 5 kings, they run off and they hide and they go to the town of Mekeda, right? They tucked themselves in that cave. They found them, rolled some stones over there, and went and finished business, and they came back. And what did they do to those 5 kings? They hung them on trees, just as they did with Jericho and the king of Ai. Chapter 11. More kings start to join forces. Right? More kings. They're like, oh no! it's all this is oh no, right? So chapter 11, we're gonna come over here, we're gonna read verses 7 through 12. This is big, we're already all I should get rid of chapter. 11 verses 7 through 12. Here we go. So Joshua came and all the people of war with him against them by the waters of Merom suddenly, and they fell upon him. So all these kings lined up and goes, all right, last stand, we got this, let's go. What happens? Joshua grabs all of his men, grabs them together, and falls on them suddenly. Sneak attack. Verse 8, the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, who smote them and chased them unto the great Zidon, and unto Mizrapoth Maim, and unto the valley of Mizpah eastward, and then smote them until they left none remaining. And Joshua did unto them as the Lord bade him, and hewed the horses, and burnt their chariots with fire. And Joshua at that time turned back and took Hazor, and smote the king thereof with the sword. For Hazor before time was the head of all those kingdoms. Right? So he went back to the snake, right? Took the head of the snake off. Right? This guy was in charge of all these other little ones. He went through and made sure he got this guy first. And they smote all the souls, verse 11, that were therein with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was not any left to breathe, and he burnt Hazor with fire. And then verse 12, all the cities of those kings and all the kings of them Joshua did take and smote them with the edge of the sword, and he utterly destroyed them, as Moses the servant of the Lord had commanded. And we know that Moses the servant of the Lord commanded that all of them were to be what? Hung trees. Right? So again, he said, even these guys, every single one of them, it was commanded. Joshua did it. Now, Joshua, here in the, I think it was verse 18 is where it said it, yeah. Let me go. Verse 18 says, and Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. Going back, following it all through, it's about 7 years of time of Joshua going through and fighting these guys, right? The Bible, it makes it look like 1, 2, 3, and you're all done. But it is a little bit of time. It took about seven years, right? A long time. So after 7 years, after that whole little mess, we finally come into the chapter that I was given this week. Chapter 12. 31 kings fall. Promised land is theirs. They did it. Now I'm going to come over to chapter 12, and I'm going to read it to you. Right? Count up. Make sure there's still 31. Now these are the kings of the land, which the children of Israel smote, and possessed their land on the other side of the Jordan, toward the rising of the sun, from the river Arnon unto the Mount Hermon, and all the plain to the east. Now we're getting specific here, right? We're on the other side of the Jordan. Now we know part of the promised land was kind of given in on the opposite side, right? Where the tribe said, we want to stay here. We'll help fight and get you the land, but we want to stay here. So, right? So now they kind of have both sides of it. So this is specifically talking about the 31 kings on this side over here. So here we go. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is upon the bank of the river Arnon, from the middle of the river, and from half Gilead, even unto the river Jabbok, which is in the border of the children of Ammon. Now take this verse, go get a map, go online, and check these places out. Right? Look and see where they're at. See how close these are. Some of them, there's some maps that'll have, I found a couple of maps that have like solid circles, empty circles, because some of these little spots, they're not 100% sure exactly where they are. They haven't found them yet. And so they believe, according to scripture, that they should be somewhere in these certain areas. Right? Verse 3, and from the plain to the sea of Chinneroth, from the east, into the sea of the plain, even the salt sea on the east, the way of Beth Jeshimoth, and from the south under Ashdoth Pisgah. I love this. And the coast of Og, right? We talked about Og. That was the giant. Everyone was afraid of this guy, right? We kind of went into the history. Go back and review Jamie. He talked about Og. It was awesome. So the king of Bashan, which is on the remnants of the giants that dwelt in Ashtaroth and Edrei, and reigned in Mount Hermon, in the Salcah and in the Bashan, under the border of the Gershonites and the Maccathites, and half Gilead, and the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Then did Moses the servant of the Lord and the children of Israel smite, and Moses the servant of the Lord gave it for a possession unto the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh. Right? We were just talking about that on the other side. Right? Now, so he leaves us there. He says, hey, so we've got these guys over here, killed those guys, now we're going to move over to this side. Verse 7 says, "These are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel smote on this side of the Jordan, on the west from Baal-gad in the valley of Lebanon, even unto the Mount Halak that goeth up to Seir, which Joshua gave unto the tribes of Israel for a possession according to their divisions. Now in the mountains, and the valleys, and the plains, and the springs, and in the wilderness, and in the south country, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites." Remember, we read about the Jebusites. They were in charge of Jerusalem. They were living there. The king of Jericho. Here we go. The king of Ai, which is beside Bethel. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. I like these names. There was only one king, so I killed 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer. The king of Debir. The king of Gedar, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah. We know about Makkedah, right? And 5 kings get hung up over there. They killed that king too, right? It also said that they hung him on a tree as well. 1. The king of Bethel, 1. Now remember, Bethel is actually, they came back to Bethel. Because they came in and they took out Ai, and then immediately went south, right? They didn't actually come back and get Bethel until later. They killed all the mighty men of Valor out of the place, but they didn't actually go through and conquer it until a little bit later. I think we'll see that in Judges. The king of Tapua, 1. The king of Hefer, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. And Lasharon, or Sharon, that's interesting. So Lasharon. The king of Medon, 1. The king of Hazor, right? We read about him. The king of Shimron. The king of Akshaph. The king of Tanakh, 1. The king of Megiddo. The king of Kedesh, 1. The king of Jokneam of Carmel, 1. The king of Dor, the coast of Dor, 1. The king of the nations of Gilgal. The king of Tisra, 1. All the kings, 31 and all. So, again, chapter 12, this is a condensed list, right? This is part of their history bit where they can say, hey, quick jump, who did we take out? What areas did we go? What kings are gone? Who's left? Because we know they're not all dead. They're supposed to kill absolutely everybody, but we know that hadn't happened yet, right? So this is keeping track of who's been had, what's been done, just a quick real summary, right? Now, promised land is theirs. Okay, so here's the promised land. This picture is a little bit blurry, but as you can see, Benjamin here, tribe of Benjamin is going to get this area with Jerusalem, Simeon, Judah, Manasseh, East Manasseh, Gad, right? Ammon, Asher, Naphtali, right? Each of the tribes are going to start getting it. We're going to read about that coming over the next couple of chapters of who gets what and what, and yeah, so that's what's coming next. So here, there's another quick look at the attack route that we took, right? We talked about it coming here. This word right here means the acacia grove, right? Come through, busted into Gilgal, camped out, took out Jericho. Made a run over here, took out Ai, killed all the guys of Bethel, right? Look how close all these places are to Jerusalem. Then what they do, they drop down here, they wiped all these guys out, and then they come right back up here and they finish going up north, right? So this is the map of Joshua's 3 campaigns all set up, right? We discussed each and every one of those campaigns. Okay, so this is probably one of the neatest things about the whole invasion here, are these Amarna letters. Now, these are actually letters for help to the Pharaoh from the cities being invaded by Joshua, right? They were literally sending letters to the Pharaoh begging for help, right? Now, the people called the nation of Israel Habiru, right? And you can see here on one of the tablets says, the Habiru are now attempting to take Jerusalem. There are tons of these. They found tons of them from this exact time talking about Israel coming through and taking everybody out. They were sending letters, please help us, please, please, please. Didn't happen though, did it? So these are really cool. Yeah?
What language is it though?
Cuneiform. It is a cuneiform. So if you look at the little the pictures, they actually look like little triangles. Like they take a stick and they press the triangles in.
Why were they called the Habiru?
I don't know. You can imagine that they wouldn't really be known as, Israel or the Jews at this point. So it's just probably what they called the tribe at the time. Like, that's what they called them, is the Habiru tribe. But yeah, you go through and this one actually, I printed this one out specifically. This one is actually this tab right here. This tab speaks of Jerusalem. It's right here, I think. Right? So you can actually read about the experience from the Canaanites while they're getting wiped out through this. Kind of interesting, huh?
That is a lot of letters to spell out.
Uniform is wild. But yeah, it's like they literally took a triangle looking stick and they would press it in different angles and in different directions, and each direction would annotate sound. And yeah, it's quite interesting. So the Amarna letters, if you haven't checked those out, look those up. They're really neat. It's a fun study, right? And then Amarna, the reason they call it Amarna letters, is Egypt had actually moved its capital from Memphis to Amarna during this time, right? So, okay. And of course, my absolute favorite, you guys all know this, I always go through Romans Road when we do this, right? We just got done going through a lot of information, right? There's a lot of stuff we have learned. We have learned all sorts of words, new definitions. We put some serious time and effort into these ones here. But, as I always say, how much of that is going to matter to you if this isn't your world? Right? Nothing. We know in Romans Road, I'm going to go through this again, right? We need to understand our way to salvation. We need to take these couple of points here. The first thing we need to understand is that we've all sinned, right? To help with that, we need to identify define define sin, right? If we've all sinned, if we're going to tell everyone that we've all sinned, we should probably know what that means. Does anybody know what sinning is? What is it to sin? Yeah, throw a guess out there.
Not being perfect before God.
Of course, none of us are perfect, right? We've all disobeyed God. To sin against God means to go against His word, right? If God says, don't do this, and you go and do it, you've sinned, right? This gets super deep. One of these days we'll get into a big study on this one. I'll absolutely love it. But we all need to recognize that we've gone against God's word, right? We take it right back to the Ten Commandments. Lie, cheat, steal, adultery. Keep it basic, right? We've all lied. We've all cheated. We've all stolen. We're all in that boat. It's real easy. Recognize that we've messed this up. We've all sinned, right? We've all gone against God. Once we realize this, then we need to understand that the wages, the cost, the price, the punishment of that sin, disobeying God, is death. Now, sin brought death onto the whole world, right? We only know life that ends. Our entire existence, everything you look at out there, trees, birds, plants, it all dies. Why? Because the wages of sin is death. Not just us. It kills everything. The universe, the stars, the planets, everything is dying. Because sin is in the world. Now, on top of that, if Jesus tarries long enough and we get put 6 feet in the dirt, we have to stand before God. Now, are you on His side? Right? Wages sin is death. If you're not, the second death is what we fear. Being separated from God, being cast in the fiery pit of hell. And hell wasn't made for us, right? Hell was made for the fallen angels. We were never supposed to go there. But because, Adam sinned, ate that apple, however you want to go through it. Right? So death, that's our punishment. The world's punishment, our punishment is death. But, right? I love it in the Bible. But, in 5:8 it tells us there's a way out. This is where Jesus comes in, right? While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, right? We owe God a death debt. Right now, if God called us home, you owe Him your spiritual life. Because you sinned against Him. But Jesus came down and said, I will take everything that you've done wrong. I will take responsibility for that. I will take the punishment for that. He came down and He died for you. The physical death, the spiritual death, He went all the way down. All the way down. But then what happened? He came up 3 days later, right? We're going to celebrate that here coming Sunday. So what do we do with this information? We've sinned. We've gone against God. We're doing it wrong. Because of this, we're going to die. Physically and spiritually. It's going to happen. It's happening. We now know that there's a way out. There's a way out. Jesus died for you. He paid that price. You don't have to pay it anymore. He's got a gift. He's got it handed out to you. But the gift doesn't do you any good unless you reach out and take it. I can hand you keys to a brand new Ferrari, but it's all yours, homie. You don't take it. Right? How do we take the gift? We need to confess with our mouth the Lord Jesus Christ. You need to call out to Jesus, like, God, I have messed this up and I know it. You need to believe in your heart that God has raised him from the grave, that Jesus Christ did come down. He died, right? He didn't almost die and kind of cripple out of it. He died. He was in the dirt for 3 days, and then God, the power of God, raised him back, never to taste death again. Right? Not like Lazarus. He didn't come back just to die again. He will never taste death again. And we know this was such a powerful event that people also rose out of their graves and went into town and had dinner with their families. You want to know why there was such a big church in Jerusalem? Because Grandma and Grandpa, who's been dead for 50 years, came in and had dinner and said, Jesus just pulled me out of paradise down there. The Christ is here. That was a powerful event. It wasn't just Jesus. Again, witnesses everywhere. Thou shalt be saved. Put your hope, faith, trust in Jesus Christ and in nothing else, because every single thing in this world will fail you at some point. But Jesus Christ will never fail you. He will always be there. Always. 3 final thoughts, you guys. You cannot outgive God. What did the Jews, what did Abraham do to deserve the promises of the land, to have his seed, more than the stars, the king to come out? Like, what did he do to get all these promises and these gifts? Nothing. He was trying to follow God. He was trying to follow God. He was the last righteous guy out there. God was like, you're the only one who's even trying. Trying. He gave on. Follow God. Put your effort into following God. Because the more you give him, he will outgive you all the time. Hand over fist. He will love you more than you could ever love anybody. God is faithful, and we can rest in his promises. We get to go through this Bible, we get to read about all the different promises of God. And we get to read all over the place of the fulfillment of these promises. Right? So we know by reading this that we can stand and be faithful and follow God with no worries. Last but not least, are you following Jesus and storing up your riches in heaven? Or is your hope in worldly affairs? A choice must be made with God or not with God. And have you made yours? Right? We're told not to store our treasures here. Moths can eat it up. Rust can wither it away. Nothing that you can get, nothing you can gather can you take with you. I could be a billionaire, and you know what? I'm going to die, and then somebody else is going to get my money. Trump's going to die, someone's going to get his money. What's the guy from Apple? My brain's kind of farting on me. Dead. He was a billionaire, right? What? He's in the dirt. He's got nothing. He has to stand before God and confess everything that's ever come out of his mouth. What does it matter that he was a billionaire down here? Doesn't. Choice must be made. You're with God, not with God. Just like the choice that Joshua was given, right? I'm not with you. Are you with me?